Hi friends. So once we have planned, we have initiated a project. Okay. Once we have also um, planned it out, we've executed it. What we have to do? We close it up. Okay, we close. So let's continue from the execution stage and then the closure and see what next we have to keep in mind. Okay, whilst we wrap up this concept of project management. Okay, so once again, I'll make this section short because I think it is short in itself. All right. Okay. So when is change? You remember we said change will always occur because projects always come with some level of uncertainty. We cannot control it sometimes. Some we can control. Some come from within. Some come from without. So at the end of the day, what do we do when change is not managed? What happens? Okay, now team members could be working with old plans. If we don't change and update it to the current trend, to what is actually prevailing on the market, on the fair value, then we'll be working with old plans. And what will happen is we may not be achieving the key or the critical success factors we want to achieve. Okay, now, what will happen is that project could also is unlikely to deliver the objectives if change is not managed. We could end up producing poor quality outputs and services if we don't adjust the system to meet up with what is prevailing. Okay, end users will also not be happy with the final product because if you end up producing poor quality outputs throughout the project and you don't really manage it well, then you should expect some pushback from the end users. Now again, the project could end up incurring more cost than we have planned because team members will end up spending time on areas that have changed. We don't need this, but you ended up spending so much time and energy on working on things which we don't really need. It could also lead to confusion and conflict amongst project or key stakeholders on the project. Okay, so change is very important. Once situations change, let us also adjust our systems, our operating procedures, so that we can ensure that we get quality value for what we actually implementing or executing. Now, the change process could sometimes be complicated. Okay, the change process could sometimes be complicated. Now, in fact, when you take Guido and Clement, they also implemented a form of control system. Okay, which also incorporated this element of change. Okay, where they asked at a point in time whether there are any corrective actions needed, and if yes, then let us identify these corrective actions and then implement them accordingly to these changes, okay, and incorporate any associated changes. Now, overall, even if you pick Guido and Clement's process, you realize that change process will always run through at a minimum this kind of configuration. Okay, so first we design or we assess the method for prioritizing change requests, and then we authorize these changes where we realize that it will go a long way to benefit the organization. Once this has been done, we agree a change budget, okay, and implement them, keep them on track, okay, adjust the system to reflect what is currently agreed. Record these changes. Why? For the benefit of an audit trail, so that we can always track back and see whether this was really documented. When I work with KPMG, there's one thing we always say: if it's not documented, it's not done. So it is always important to recommend or to record these changes, to document them, so that we can always have an audit trail. And then, of course, communicate these changes to those who need it to work. Don't just document and leave it on a desk, on your shelf or in a drawer for it to be gathering dust. Communicate these changes. Very important. All right. Now, in terms of configuration management, it is also very important within any project management system. What it does is that, the word configuration, you configure something, you put in something in form of a structural format or framework so that you can always follow through to ensure that it systematically and logically leads to an agreed output. Okay. Now, it helps us to track, to control all aspects of the project, and it helps us to document any deliverables that comes out from the project logically, sequentially. Okay. Now, within this configuration management, there are some things we need to always keep note of. One, the version control for documentation. Okay. The ownership and responsibility for the documentation, how we can track and authorize any changes within the system, how we can also monitor, control any procedures to ensure that only authorized documents are held within the configuration system. And again, assessing control over projects. Very important to keep all of this within the configured system. Now, the change control system, which we have discussed so far, will be part of the configuration management system. Okay, so it is part within. Okay, and when you take any project which does not have any configuration management, then we'll end up getting several versions or documents or products scattering all around. Okay, because and we will not be sure which one is the correct version. So it's always important to keep the updated one, which would always the updated agreed change document within the configuration system, which everyone can refer to as the final point of call. Okay. Now, like I said, what are the purposes of these control systems? It's a control system actually. It helps us to prevent any deviations. It helps us to correct any deviations. And it also helps to prevent any future deviations by revising our plans. We will revise our budget, we adjust our budget, our measures, any plans we've put in place, okay? And it helps us to also implement recommendations which we have gathered from monitoring, from review process, from evaluating the project. Very important to always have this control system, configuration system in place. Take a good look at Guido and Clement's picture or configuration which they set up on page 341 of the revised document 2021 E2 CIMA text. Okay, you see that they clearly stated that, listen, let us establish the baseline plan, the budget, the schedule, the DIP, the detailed implementation plan, the log frame, the log frameworks, okay, the log frames. Then we start the project. During each reporting period, they are saying that let's collect data on actual performance. Let us incorporate any changes into the project plan, okay? And then let's circulate these updated project schedules, the budgets, the forecast which we have updated. Let's circulate it, let's communicate it to those who need it. And then, of course, along the line, let us analyze current status, compare this current status with the plan, with the budget. Are there any corrective measures? If there are no corrective measures, continue, collect another data, go over it, run it through the project and see what you can do. But if there are corrective measures, then identify these corrective actions and incorporate changes within the system. Beautiful, quite right? And it makes sense. I mean, it's logical. We can always infer and pick it up. Okay. So this, what I've mentioned, these are control systems. They help us to prevent and correct deviations. And if there are any future deviations we may run into, it helps us to avoid them. We revise our plans and targets, and it also help us to include any recommendations we found from our monitoring, evaluation, and review systems. Okay. The two most important elements in this control system, I don't know why, and on the slides things change. Okay, I think that one wasn't really written. The two most important elements used in the control systems are project reports and meetings. Now, the control system has a project report and a project meeting. Report simply saying that let us enhance, let us facilitate communication of controls. Okay, so and then the main reports produced are exception reports, progress reports. You may have heard this. So what is so exceptional from the rule, from the generic expectations? And what is the progress report? Where have we gotten to? What next do we have to do? And then we have the project meetings, okay, as well as trying to facilitate this communication. These project meetings help us to enhance the relationship between or among the team members. So here, let us hold periodic meetings. Let us sit back and learn lessons from what has happened on the project. Any reviews, anything we should learn? What are you picking up? What are the hazards alongside? What are the success factors? What motivating word can you put across so that someone can keep up the good work he or she is doing? So very important. Let's report, let's document, and let us also have meetings that will help us edge us on. Okay. Now we close the project. closure, very important. At the end of the day, we said every project, from the definition of a project, unique set of tasks or activities that has an inception and a closure. You remember when we were defining projects. So it's unique. It must have a start. It must have a close, an end. Okay. So in terms of closure, is the final stage of the project life cycle. Okay. And it helps us to finish the work we've begun. Typically, that's what we are saying. At the end of the day, at this stage, what are we looking for? We deliver the project to the end users. There's the end of project meeting. Always when the project closes, it's always important for all the team members or the key stakeholders to come together and have an end of project meeting and document something. Let us all sign off. Let us write off finally. Let's issue the final report, okay? And then we disband the team. We are done. Everybody go your way and we leave, okay? There is an expanded text in the book, expanded section in the text, okay, in the book, which gives us what goes into end of project review meetings. A detailed one, the internal review, the external review. Okay, the internal review is usually the team who undertook the project. Okay, the external review is the customer, the one who is going to use it. Again, we also have a detailed element where it talks about the report, the final report. Okay, which we may always want to refer to. Okay. Then there is this post-completion audit, PCA. Okay. At the end of the project, let's audit. Let's see whether things work as per the PID, the project initiation document. Let's see whether there are areas we could continuously improve. Very key to see. At the end of the day, what we need to do in the post-completion audit is normally held a few months after the delivery of the project to the final user. We want to see what is the feedback. Okay, continuous feedback is important. That's why you can see in construction projects, once the project is done, they give the contractor maybe a year or 6 months, and they tell you that when we see any cracks in the building or any potholes on the roads, you come and fix it at your own cost. That's a form of post-completion audit, okay, to ensure whether the project which has been delivered is of a higher quality, to also assess any effectiveness of the entire management process of the project, to see whether the budget we executed, we gave out, provides us value for money, okay. And again, this closing stage helps us to also consider how cost effective our system is compared to even competitors, not just our internal budget, to what competitors would have done in the past. Okay. Closure stage also helps us to compare our PID with the final project outcomes. Initially, you would see that all the individual project outputs will be consolidated into one project outcome, and helps us to compare this PID to the final project outcomes. Okay. Summary, I end. So there's key important thing for us to know that the concept of project management is very key in every organization. Let us understand the key terms, what roles they play, the entire project life cycle. Let us try to understand it, okay? It is important that we all go through the chapter 9 of the book of the core text. Whether using the old version or the current version, I think we should all have the same details to talk about. Just a little bit plugged into the current version, but you should still have the same. There's a tutorial question. Okay, we want to discuss it in class, one-on-one. Usually, friends, we would expect that you look through the tutorial questions before you come to class. If you can, if possible, and that's the best way of learning, post your answers on the feed so that target as project. Post your answers on the feed so that when we come to class, it will make life easy for us to just navigate through and save time for other stuff. Okay. All right. I'll leave it here and I'll see you in the next section where we look at project management techniques and tools. Okay. A little complicated. Should I say complicated? No. A little simple calculations in terms of using some decision trees and simulation analysis. We can easily do it. There's nothing difficult under the sun. We can all do it. Friends, I'll leave it here and I'll see you when I see you. Take care. Bye for now.